I got the chance to meet Anne Paré through organizing this event. From our first conversation, I noticed Anne sparked me. She's a storyteller with a deep commitment to authentic reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, to facing the climate crisis, and to future generations' well-being. Anne worked for many years as a child and family therapist. She lives on Estes traditional territory, also known as Pender Island, BC. She recently turned 80 and describes herself as an elder who is refired, not retired. Anne says, though climate issues are overwhelming, being engaged and creative are my best antidotes. I channel my fears into various forms of activism, especially local groups and projects. Anne's activism includes filmmaking, spoken word poetry, skits, promoting and organizing events which weave together Indigenous knowledge with climate science, and running a storytelling retreat for women for the past 25 years. You can learn more about Anne from Elders in Our Midst, accessed from the SPEC website homepage. Please welcome Anne Paré.
I want to thank SPEC for um, offering me this opportunity and putting me in the hot seat, which means I'm going to have to stretch because I've never done it quite like this before. I revere SPEC. I think it's a remarkable organization, so I feel really honored to be with you here today. And and SPEC gave me permission to choose my topic, which is amazing. So I've chosen, what have we learned from our experiences? What have we experienced in our lives? What have our lives taught us that can help us at this really, really challenging time in our history and in our lives? And we're elders, and the job of the elder is to hold the knowledge and be there for the younger generation. So, what can we kind of mine from our lives that can help us to know, to shed some light on how to move forward? And really, that is, the ancestors told stories. I mean, not only the indigenous ancestors, but our own ancestors would have, sat around fires, sat around tables, sharing history, oral history, learning from each other, building connection. And so here we are, we're on a screen doing the same kind of thing. Yes. Um, and as I'm talking, I'm going to tell some stories and some of my own history, and I'll throw out some questions just to sort of percolate your own minds in terms of what are the stories that come up for you. And we are going to have a breakout session, and then we're going to come back and do some more talking afterwards. There'll be small groups for the breakout session, and if that's hard for you, you might want to journal during that time and then come back again because there'll be lots of chance to keep talking once we get back. So I think I'm going to talk about maybe 20, 25 minutes, then we'll have a short breakout, and then we'll come back. So yeah, I had to ask, how do I identify myself? What are the roles I've played that I think I have gained some knowledge from? And the first is daughter. I am the eldest daughter in a family of 9 children. You might guess that's a Catholic family, and you'd be right. 6 younger brothers. And, so that role definitely gave me the position of caretaker in the family. And also, I think originally, be a good girl because, with 9 kids, how do you ever get any attention? So I didn't choose originally anyway to be the black sheep. I chose to be the good girl. So, and really, I mean, how do we learn what the family rules are and what our roles are? I mean, nobody tells us. I mean, my mother didn't say, look, this is how to organize a cupboard. This is how to put a meal on the table. She was an amazing organizer. And I am a good organizer. I can reorganize a cupboard in about 2 minutes. And she never taught me that, but I absorbed it. My father was a doctor, and he led the school board for many, many years to get good education for us kids. And so his work ethic was a pretty tough work ethic for himself, and I find I have that too. So those early what we the atmosphere we grow up in, the environment we grow up in, shapes us in so many ways. And um, when I think about all those growing up years, I have to say these days, what's standing out for me is that though I started as a good girl, I actually went bad over time. But actually, somebody said, "Well, no, you went badass, Marianne," which I looked up. Actually, the definition of badass is all positive, bad and ass, but that's badass is good. So, um, the way I became badass was that in my lovely Catholic family in the 60s, we were, encouraged by my parents to, we could, have discussions about things. And I raised the question about, well, why would premarital sex be a mortal sin if God gave us these bodies that loved pleasure? And well, I kind of blew up the family at that point in time by doing that. My parents were not ready for that. And it was a really difficult time in my life. And really, I was just trying to answer that question. I was such a good girl at that point. I wouldn't have thought to have sex outside of marriage, but I thought, maybe it's not necessary to do it that way. Anyhow, I mean, the sexual revolution was kind of hitting before the religious revolution at that time. So yeah, I went from good girl to bad girl very, very quickly, and it was one of the hardest. Well, it was the hardest thing in my life up to that point, and it involved pregnancy, it involved the loss of a baby, it involved an alienation from my family, and these days, as I look back at it, I think, wow, did I ever learn a lot then? Did I ever have to count on myself? Did I ever, have to come through a very difficult thing? And I think one of the important things I had to learn was to reconcile that I did not have the ideal parents that I wanted to have that would have said, well, let's talk about that, Marianne. But I had very much good enough parents. And I think that some of the job of becoming an adult and being able to be an elder yourself is to think of parents as people instead of those people we want them to be. So that was a formative time in my life. Yeah. And I wonder if, any ideas, any memories come up for you in your life, in your early life. What is there a story you carry that has been really important in shaping who you have become, that you carry with you the values or the experiences, the knowledge? So there's just a question to percolate as we go along. So from daughter, good girl to bad girl, to leaving home. And I was a Catholic. So what was I going to do? I was not going to, I turned out not to be following the path that had been sort of set for me. But I actually um, became a farmer in my early 20s, went off the beaten path, and left university, went back to the land, and having thought that I had lost religion, because I really didn't feel supported by the Catholic Church in that very difficult experience that I had, I thought that I had given up spirituality because I thought they went hand in hand. But actually, farming was just the most radical experience for me of finding spirituality. We had animals. We had a sugar bush. This is in Quebec. We had a huge garden. We fed ourselves. We worked with a workhorse. Um, and we saw the cycle of life, birth, death, birth, and the interconnectedness of everything. So, you know, that to me was a thrilling part of my life. And I especially remember at that time, I had a friend who committed suicide, who I was very close to, and who was going to come to my home and instead chose to end her life. And at the same time that happened, her name was Gay. And when that happened, we had our milk cow gave birth to a perfect little baby calf whom we named Gabriel. And I was the one who was milking the cow that month. We would do it in once a month for a month at a time. So I lay against that cow's side and wept and milked and fed that calf. And the consolation of new life with death was really profound for me. As was the we were we were a commune, so we all had to do all the work. I was chainsawing while the guys were baking, and we were poor. Oh my God, we were so poor, but we were so rich. I mean, we ate like royalty, and we had nature everywhere around us, and it was a really, really rich experience. And we were in our bodies, we found what our body capacity was. And I learned then, taking good care of the body means eating good food, and eating good food means you better grow it yourself. And so I've grown food ever since. So that was wonderful learning for me. Um, and then I actually moved in and out of different parts of careers, but I ended up being a therapist, and that was I became a childcare counselor actually in the early 70s when there was no training. You just were on probation for 6 months. But I felt I had been trained because I had six younger brothers, and I had the really good fortune to get very good training in family therapy and in play therapy. And so I worked with families, but I never could figure out, how do you just talk to the adults and just play with children? Well, playing with children is a transformative experience. Kids can heal themselves through their imagination in the most extraordinary way, but the parents are supposed to be outside in the waiting room. That never made sense to me. So again, sort of a maverick because my supervisor, like I said, I want to, be able to bring the parents into the playroom and play and talk with the children. She said, well, it sounds good, but who's going to supervise you? It's like I had to go off the beaten track again, and try to figure out how do you do both? Because when a kid's in pain, so is the family, and when the family's in pain, the kids are going to be in pain. So how do you put all that together? So I fumbled along and I videotaped the work I was doing so I could look at it and see what's working, what's not working. And I talked a lot with my clients, the people, the families that I worked with, giving me feedback. And they gave permission for me to use the videos for training and supervision. And yeah, so I ended up, I think, 25 years. I was doing that work and using video to make PowerPoints, which I am not a techie person, but I did that. And I learned so much from the people that I worked with. My training taught me deep listening, and deep listening taught me to learn from the people that I was working with, and trust that they had their ways to figure out their paths. And nobody knows the answer except you. It's inside of you. And boy, did I ever learn that. And I especially learned that from the kids. They could create their ways out of trauma in the most marvelous ways. So I learned trust. I certainly did. And what I learned is it, just like our bodies can heal, like, you break a bone, how do you ever recover from that? You have some terrible illness. How does your body know how to come through the other side? Our bodies know that. And so does our psyche. Our psyche knows how to heal. And certainly creativity and being able to speak in a safe place and being heard are some of the very powerful ways for healing. Yeah, so I guess probably, well, I'll move on to storytelling because in a way it came out of being a therapist. I mean, what is therapy? It's a person telling you their story and you really listening closely. And I heard amazing stories and I watched transformation. I mean, I never was found it hard to do. I mean, I heard some of the hardest things I've ever heard, known people to go through, but I never felt burdened by it because I watched them change. I watched them grow. I watched them find ways through. So yeah, and I had a really good friend, Jenny, who also was a therapist, and we both wanted to do art therapy, but we didn't have the money for that or the time to get training. So we just started doing art once a month together. We just, get big pieces of paper, and it was not about the product, it was about process, and we'd just paint and paint, and then we'd put on the kettle and we'd just look at the paint, what we'd painted, and we'd just talk about what we saw and ask each other questions. And that was just so revealing, so exciting, and it just cracked open our creative process. And then out of that, we started storytelling. And so that's the storytelling that I think Olivia mentioned, 26th year of a storytelling community. And wow, what I learned from that is if you create a safe space for women's creativity, anything can happen. It's just extraordinary the way women can enter their imagination. It's like giving kids a dress up walk, and we do have a dress up. We have wigs and costumes and masks and art supplies, and we have a format, and time is limited and everything like that, and lots of time for food and talking to each other and everything. And that's been just a joy in my life, which again also just sort of unfolded from, therapy, friendship, creativity, and then storytelling. And then the marvelous creativity of women's, I've learned so much from that. And then I think storytelling then sort of naturally moved into filmmaking for me because on our island, a lot of people were doing climate actions and then uh, and reconciliations, and so I wanted that story to get heard broader. Um, but I didn't know much about making films. I went to a workshop, and then I found, and I made a couple of films by myself with my cell phone, and then I went to one of the teachers on Pender Island, who was like a 23-year-old young Japanese man, and said, "Well, Kenda, I want to make this film, but I don't know how to do it. I know the story, but I don't know how to." He said, "Sure." So we made a film together, put it in film festivals. It won audience award at Salt Spring Island Film Festival. It's just like, what a surprise. How could that have happened? We're making another film, he and I. And yeah, I think once you open up creativity, lots of things can happen. I don't consider myself a filmmaker at all, but here I am. And community. I just wanted my community to have a voice. Um, so yeah, storytelling in many ways. And so a question just to percolate for yourselves is, do you have a favorite story that you've heard or that you like to tell? And what is that story? And why is it meaningful for you? And maybe what have you learned from that story? So I would think, yes, from listening, being on Pender Island with a lot of climate action and reconciliation happening, formed shaped me into an activist. When I was a therapist, I always thought, wow, if I find that I am a band-aid for the ills of society, I'm going to quit my job and I'll be an activist. But I never felt that I was a band-aid. I felt that I was a witness of transformation. So, but once I retired, yeah, I love this. I think Joanna Macy, yeah. So she says, the most radical thing we can do at this time is to be fully present to what's happening in the world. And that's not easy. How do we be present to what's happening in the world? Um, oh, here's another one. I like this too. This is oh, this is Alice Walker. Activism is the rent I pay for living on this planet. Yeah. So those kinds of things, what come up for me, and being open to what's happening is terrifying, really. So feeling terrified makes you feel alone. So the only way to get over that is to be with people. And yeah, I belong to a number of groups, things that I've started, things that I've joined, Climate Cafe. We run that once a month on Pender Island. Community conversations where we can talk about anything. I belong to the Pender Ocean Defenders, and we've started a grief and joy club where we're allowed to talk about the most horrible stuff, but also what gives us joy. And yeah, I mean, to it's things are dark, but when things are dark, then the lighter things are even more precious. My partner John is a retired Jungian analyst, so he's like really into the dark and the light, and he's always about both and I go, oh, don't be so irritating. Tell me whether it's this or that. But he's right. I mean, when things are their darkest, the light is there too. And I find the more I can be with community and acting and choosing what to do and act, and we say food and fun has to be part of it. The more I don't feel terrified, the more I feel like I'm in good company and I feel interconnected. Um, so that's the kind of thing that's works for me. I mean, right now, I mean, my happiest place, my safest place is on the streets, really. Hopefully being led by Indigenous people because they themselves, their belief system is that everything is interconnected and that the earth is our mother. And Indigenous people around the world all share that belief. So I'm putting my money on them, and I'm very happy to go to events where I can be led by Indigenous people. So here's another question just to percolate for you. What's your safe place given how hard things are? And what do you find gives you a sense of connectedness in this difficult time? And who are your people that you can really talk about hard stuff with? And what can you do together? And it doesn't have to be changing the world. I think I gave that up a while ago. But our Grief and Joy Club had a pasta night, and we made like 10 kinds of pasta, and it was just thrilling and it was wonderful. So that's the joy part of the Grief and Joy. And yeah, I guess the last thing I'd say is about being human, and which kind of goes with what I've just been saying. I find myself at risk for feeling ashamed of being a human these days. And that's a terrible feeling. But if I look at individuals and I look at what we have accomplished as a species, we're actually miraculous. So we're both and, as my partner would say. Yeah, and we're resilient. We're amazingly resilient. And I don't know where things are going. But I want to be in good company, be in good company for it. And I find that looking at what has worked in my life, how I've grown, what got me step by step by step, and this exercise to prepare for today has made me realize, these things are connected. I actually started being a maverick when I was 19 and said to my parents, well, what about premarital sex not being a mortal sin? And I have stayed on that track, I think, being a good girl maverick, maybe is what I am. So I wonder for you, like what stays with you in terms of your history and your experiences that you draw on these days to help you being a human. And then is there a story that comes up or any thoughts about that you would like to share? Um, and um, and as I said, I mean, well, and you can come and share. Listening is really, really powerful. So, you know, we need listeners as well as sharers.
As we close, a huge thank you to Marianne for inspiring us with her stories. I think you heard that over and over, Marianne, that you're an inspiration. And also to thank you for your warmth and naturalness.